In the last week of December 1944, in the forests east of Bastogne, an American infantryman sees a pistol lying in the snow beside a road. It is a German officer's sidearm, blued steel, undamaged, sitting in plain view the way nothing in a combat zone sits in plain view by accident. He has been told, in writing, twice, not to touch it. In October of 1943, the War Department's intelligence bulletin warned that souvenir hunting was costing American lives. In February of 1945, 2 months from where this soldier is standing, the bulletin will say it again, and this time it will name the trick outright. German units have taken to leaving pistols in obvious places with explosive charges built into the mechanism, charges strong enough to take off a man's hand, wired to detonate, not when the gun is found, but when the trigger is pulled. He knows the warning. He has heard it read aloud by an officer who did not enjoy reading it. He walks toward the pistol anyway. That walk is the subject of what follows. By the summer of 1945, American soldiers wanted a German handgun more than they wanted food, more than mail from home, more than sleep, and hundreds of thousands of captured pistols were already crossing the Atlantic in duffel bags and footlockers. A War Department memorandum from the end of August 1944 made the traffic legal for those who bothered with it. A commanding officer's signature on a slip collectors still call capture papers, worded so loosely it passed almost any firearm through customs untouched. The men who skipped the paperwork simply hid the gun and said nothing. Then, or ever, 25 of those pistols make up this list, counted down from the ones an old man handed over without a fight, to one that was a federal felony the moment it touched American soil, to one that sold at auction for more than $40,000 because of a single name attached to it, to the one the Germans left in the road on purpose, the one that comes back at the very end of this list. Keep that bulletin in mind. We begin at the bottom with the guns that cost almost nothing to get. Number 25, the Dreiss Model 1907. It was a .32 caliber pocket automatic, designed before the First World War by Louis Schmeisser and built at Rheinmetall's works in Sommerda. Obsolete by 1918 and left in depot storage for a quarter century before the Wehrmacht pulled it back out in the autumn of 1944 to arm the Volkssturm, the last-ditch militia of boys too young and men too old for the regular army. It was already an antique twice over by the time it saw a second war. The American who took one rarely took it from a soldier. He took it from a man in his 60s, wearing a civilian coat with an armband sewn to the shoulder, in a village that had usually already surrendered before the pistol changed hands. Nobody photographed the moment. Nobody filed papers on it. The Dreiss went into a coat pocket rather than a duffel bag because nothing about the exchange felt like it was worth declaring. An old man's gun, handed over without a fight, for nothing more than being left alone. Today it sits at the bottom of the market its own capture created, honest examples selling for somewhere between $200 and $500, the cheapest German trophy most collectors will ever be offered, a fitting price for a pistol that was obsolete before the war, that made it briefly relevant had even started. Number 24, the Langenhan FL Selbstlader. Friedrich Langenhan's workshop at Zella Mehlis built it as a stopgap sidearm for a country that had run short of proper ones. A crude .32 caliber pistol, something on the order of 55,000 made across its run. The design cut every corner it could. The breech block was held in place by a single screw, and if that screw worked loose under recoil, the whole assembly could drive backward into the shooter's own face. It was never meant to last. Most of them did anyway. More often than not, it came off a rear area clerk, rather than a soldier, a man whose war had consisted of filing paper, rather than firing a rifle, and there was no fight in the transaction at all. A raised hand, a holster unbuckled, a pistol changing owners in under a minute. Its value to the GI who carried it home had nothing to do with the pistol itself. It was German. That was the entire appeal, and it was enough. Complete original examples bring a few $100s on the collector's market today, modest money for a modest gun, and the buyers who know the design check that single screw before they check anything else. The flaw that nearly took a German soldier's face off in wartime is still there, in the steel, 8 decades later. Number 23, the Ortgies pocket pistol. Heinrich Ortgies designed it in Erfurt in the early 1920s, a hammerless .32 caliber automatic with nothing on its exterior to catch on cloth or a holster flap. No exposed hammer, no sharp edges, a gun built for a coat pocket rather than a battlefield. Deutsche Werke absorbed the design not long after, and tens of thousands were built across the interwar years, carried less by soldiers than by German police officers and party officials, the men who governed occupied towns rather than fought for them. Which is exactly where an American found one, not on a battlefield, but in a town square, taken from a surrendered policeman standing beside his own station house. The pistol handed across without a word of protest, because the war for that town was already over. It slid inside a coat lining and stayed there, quiet, the way the gun itself had always been designed to be, and it asked nothing of the man who carried it beyond keeping it hidden until the ship home. Clean examples sell today in the low hundreds of dollars, unremarkable money for an unremarkable-looking pistol, and it is the one stamped with a German police unit's marking that bring a premium, proof on the steel itself, of exactly whose holster it came from. Number 22, the Walther Model 9. Walther built it at Zella Malis starting in 1921, a vest pocket .25 caliber automatic, barely 4 inches from muzzle to backstrap, small enough that a Luftwaffe officer could carry one inside a flight jacket as a last resort and never feel its weight. It fired the smallest cartridge of any pistol on this list, and no one carried it expecting to win a gunfight. They carried it expecting never to be searched. That was the whole of its appeal. A man who could not get his hands on anything larger, no Luger, no P38, nothing worth the risk of a full search at the docks, could still come home with a genuine German pistol. Because the Model 9 disappeared into a pocket the way it had been built to disappear into one. It required no fight to take and no ingenuity to hide, and for the soldier without connections or luck, it was often the only German handgun he would ever own. Wartime production examples carrying Nazi proof marks sell for several $100s today, and the price climbs when the original box survives with it, a small cardboard container that has outlasted the empire whose eagle is stamped inside the lid. Number 21, the Mauser Model 1914. The design was already 25 years old by the time the Second World War reached its final year. A .32 caliber pocket pistol Mauser had been building since before the First World War and never stopped building, with hundreds of thousands produced across its life. Germany kept issuing it to staff officers and to the railway police long after frontline units had moved on to newer sidearms, which meant it survived in the places an army keeps its paperwork rather than the places it keeps its soldiers. That is where Americans found it. Not on a battlefield, but in a captured headquarters building, pulled out of a desk drawer alongside file folders and a telephone, taken by a soldier who had walked into an office rather than a firefight. For a while it went home the easiest way of all. Thousands were simply mailed, parcel post, before the regulations on what a serviceman could send tightened enough to close that route. A pistol from a staff officer's desk arrived in an American mailbox with no more ceremony than a letter. A wartime example in good condition brings roughly $300 to $600 today, a modest sum for a pistol whose real distinction was never how it fought, but how easily it could be found in a room where no one was fighting at all. Number 20, The Sauer Model 1930 Behörden Model. The name means roughly the authorities' model, and it describes the gun exactly. A .32 caliber pistol built by J.P. Sauer and sewn at Suhl and sold in quantity to German police forces through the 1930s. A working sidearm for men who patrolled streets rather than fronts. It was never glamorous. It was reliable, unremarkable, and issued by the thousand to police departments across Germany in the years before anyone in those departments expected to be fighting a war at all. That is how it changed hands, town by town. As American units took German towns through the spring of 1945, local police forces surrendered by the thousands, and a police armory falling intact into American custody was, for a souvenir hunting GI, close to the single most productive event of the entire war. Dozens of matching sidearms handed over at once, racked and ready, no fighting required to take a single one of them. A soldier assigned to inventory a captured station house could simply walk out with his choice. Examples carrying clear police unit markings sell today for around $400 to $800, the stamp of a specific department worth more to a collector than the pistol underneath it. Proof that somewhere in Germany, an entire armory once surrendered at once, and this was one gun out of the rack. Number 19, the Steyr-Hahn Model 1912. It began as an Austrian service pistol of the First World War, built in the town of Steyr, and carried by the Emperor's soldiers a generation before any of the men who would capture it in 1945 were born. When Germany annexed Austria in 1938, the Wehrmacht inherited the old stocks along with the factory that made them, and Steyr rechambered roughly 60,000 of the pistols for the German 9mm cartridge, stamping the numerals 08 into the slide so a soldier would know, at a glance, to load Luger ammunition into a gun built for something else entirely. It fed from a fixed magazine, loaded from the top with a stripper clip rather than a detachable box, which made it look and handle like something older and stranger than it was. An American who took one, usually from a second-line unit rather than the front, since the pistol had long since been handed down to garrison troops and rear area formations, was carrying a relic of one war pressed back into service for a second, a fact the pistol itself announced in every outdated motion of loading it. Today, honest examples run several $100s, and the German-marked rechambered guns, the ones that fought in both wars under two different flags, climb past $1,000, priced for the 20-year gap between their manufacture and their second career. Number 18, the Femeru 37M. It was a Hungarian pistol carrying a German designation, a .32 caliber automatic descended from the work of the Budapest engineer Rudolf Frommer, supplied to Germany under contract and stamped Pistole 37 with a small lowercase U added to the marking. For Ungarn, Hungary, the country that had actually built it, Germany ordered something on the order of 50,000, and most of that order went not to infantry units, but to the Luftwaffe, into the flight suits of pilots and bomber crews who wanted something small enough to carry in the air. Most of the surviving examples came home a different way. An American did not take a Femeru off a surrendered soldier in a column. He took it off a downed German airman at a crash site, sometimes reached first by farm boys or military police rather than combat troops, a category of capture that produced no paperwork of any kind, no certificate, no signature, nothing but a pistol pulled from a wrecked fuselage and pocketed before anyone official arrived to ask about it. Clear Luftwaffe-marked examples bring several $100s today from the collectors who know exactly what that small lowercase u on the slide means. The one detail that turns an unremarkable Hungarian pocket pistol into a very specific piece of the German air war. Number 17, the Astra 600. By 1943, Germany was short of sidearms on two fronts and went shopping outside its own borders, a measure of how thin its own industry had grown. The order went to Uncheta y Compañía of Guernica, Spain, for a heavy 9mm service pistol, the Astra 600, and the Reich contracted for around 50,000 of them. Only about 11,000 ever reached the front. The Allied advance closed the French border in the summer of 1944, and the rest of the contract sat crated in a Spanish warehouse, while the customer that had ordered it came apart. A GI who claimed one from a surrendered German officer was holding one of the few that ever crossed into German service, and he had no way of knowing it. The pistol carried Spanish markings alongside German proofs, a combination that confused everyone who saw it, and families spent decades assuming the strange gun in the drawer was a souvenir from somewhere else entirely. Spain, Portugal, anywhere but the war that actually produced it. It looked to an untrained eye like a gun that had wandered into the story by accident. Waffenamt-proofed wartime examples in good condition sell today for several $100s, up to around $1,000. The German inspection eagle doing all the explaining the Spanish crest never could. Number 16, the CZVZ-27. When German troops occupied Bohemia in 1939, they took the Česká Zbrojovka works at Prague along with it, and the plant kept building the same flat-point .32 caliber pocket pistol it had built before, now stamped for Berlin as the Pistol 27. It ran at full capacity for the rest of the war. Something on the order of 450,000 came off that line under German control, which made it, by volume alone, the German pistol an ordinary rifleman was most likely to end up with in a garrison, a headquarters, or a surrendered depot. It was small enough to disappear without ceremony, into a sock, a glove box, the lining of a coat, and it passed for an unremarkable pocket gun for years, the small eagle stamped into the slide, the only thing distinguishing it from any pre-war Czech automatic a man might have picked up on his own. Nobody paid a price for it beyond the risk of carrying an undeclared pistol at all, and that was the whole point of taking one. A genuine German-marked example in excellent condition brings around $500 to $850 today, and the eagle is the whole reason. Number 15, the FN model 1922. This one runs backward from the rest. The Belgian Browning design had been built at Herstal since before the war, and when Germany overran Belgium in May of 1940, it kept the line running under occupation, producing the pistol as the Pistol 626 with well over 300,000 delivered to German forces across 4 years of continuous manufacture. There was no battlefield capture here, because there was no need for one. American troops liberating Herstal in September of 1944 walked into a factory still full of finished German-marked pistols, stacked and stamped, and never issued to anyone, the occupation having ended before the guns could reach a front that no longer existed for Belgium. The men who carried one home had not taken it from a holster or a body. They had taken it off a production line, the way a soldier might take a rifle from an armory shelf, the war having ended for that particular gun before it ever left the building it was made in. There was no risk in it, no negotiation, no old man to disarm, only a warehouse, and the time it took to fill a duffel bag. German-accepted wartime examples sell today for roughly $400 to $700, a price with no capture story attached to it at all, only a factory and a date. Number 14. The Beretta Model 1934. Italy adopted it in the year that gave it its name, a .380 caliber service pistol carried by Italian officers across North Africa and up the length of Italy. Then, in September of 1943, Italy changed sides, and the Germans requisitioned the surviving stock wholesale, stamping their own acceptance marks over the Italian ones and issuing the same pistols to their own units, a factory's output claimed twice by two different armies. It is the one pistol on this list an American could have captured from either enemy in the same campaign, first from a surrendering Italian division in Sicily or North Africa, and later from the German troops who had inherited the guns those same Italians left behind. Men who fought up the peninsula brought them home by the thousands. The bluing-worn silver at the muzzle, where a thumb had rubbed it, through 2 years of a war fought on 2 different sides of the same border, under 2 different flags, stamped onto the identical steel. A wartime-dated German-marked gun with matching numbers and its holster sells today for several $100s and up. The German stamp over Italian steel, the detail that tells the whole story. Number 13, the Reichsrevolver model, 1879. By 1879, the German Empire had adopted it as standard issue, a massive single-action 10.6mm service revolver with no safety, no ejector, and a loading gate that had to be worked one round at a time. It was already obsolete before the First World War, a design from the age of Bismarck still sitting in arsenal racks 2 generations later. In 1944, German arsenals pulled it back out of storage anyway, to put something, anything, into the hands of the Volkssturm. An American taking one in the last months of the war was not taking it from a soldier in the ordinary sense. He was taking it from an old man conscripted into a militia unit, and the revolver itself startled him more than the man holding it did, a soldier serving in a mechanized army, standing in a surrendered town, handing over a sidearm older than his own grandfather's rifle, its finish worn thin from decades in an arsenal rack rather than from use in any war at all. Today, complete examples with matching numbers bring roughly $600 to $1,500, and the surviving cavalry-length barrels, the ones built for mounted troops in an army that no longer had any, bring more still. Number 12, the Mauser model, 1934. The Mauser Works built this small .32 caliber pocket pistol in quantity for the army, for the police, and above all, for the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, whose Eagle and M acceptance stamp is the detail collectors look for first. Naval officers carried it aboard ship and inside the concrete U-boat pens on the French coast, a pistol meant for a man who expected to fight indoors, if he fought at all, rather than in a field. When Brest fell in September of 1944, when Lorient and Saint-Nazaire held out under siege for months and then surrendered in the final weeks of the war, the pistols passed into American hands along with the crews who had carried them, and a signature could be obtained from an officer standing at the very pier where a U-boat had tied up. The capture papers written in those 3 ports are today among the most desirable documents in the entire field, rarer, in some cases, than the pistols they describe. A plain example is modest. A Kriegsmarine marked model 1934, paired with paperwork naming one of those 3 ports, commands several $100s more. The price of a pistol rising with the fall of the harbor it was captured in. Number 11. The Walther PP. Introduced in 1929 as the Polizei Pistole, it was the first commercially successful double-action automatic ever built, with a loaded chamber indicator pin a man could feel in the dark, and a decocking safety that let him carry it ready without carrying it cocked. A genuinely modern piece of engineering a decade ahead of most of the pistols on this list. German police carried it. The SS carried it. Nazi party officials carried it as a badge of rank as much as a weapon. Because it belonged to the security apparatus rather than to the front line, taking one usually meant taking it from a man in a black or green uniform, standing in an occupied town, not from a soldier in a field, and the Walther PP is the pistol most often paired with capture papers signed during occupation duty rather than in the middle of combat. A trophy of policing a defeated country rather than of fighting one. Wartime examples with clear German markings run today from roughly $800 to $1,600, and confirmed police or SS unit marks push the price higher again. A premium paid for the uniform the pistol was surrendered by, not the uniform of the man who fought. Number 10. The Mauser HSc. Mauser brought it out in 1940, and it looked like nothing else the company had ever built. A shrouded hammer, a swept, modern profile in .32 caliber, more than 250,000 produced before the collapse, and issued to officers, to police, and to the Navy. It was small enough to disappear into a musette bag and handsome enough that men with a choice of trophies took it over pistols twice its size and weight. The late war guns tell the story of German industry in their finish alone. Machining that had been smooth, and even in 1941 grows rougher month by month, the tolerance is looser, the polish thinner, until the last pistols off the line are nearly bare steel, assembled by a factory running out of everything except orders to keep producing. A collector can date a wartime HSc almost to the season by how much of that polish survives, the decline of a company readable in the surface of a single pistol. Wartime examples with clear proof marks sell today in the range of $500 to $1,000, more for Navy-marked guns. The Eagle stamp again outweighing the pistol it sits on. Number 9, the Sauer 38 HJP Sauer and Sohn built it at their works in Suhl from 1938 until the works were overrun in 1945. Something on the order of 200,000 made. It was a .32 caliber pistol with the hammer folded away inside the slide and a decocking lever that let an officer carry it loaded and rendered safe in the same motion. A gun built for a man who expected to use it, if he ever used it at all, across a desk rather than a battlefield. German officers bought it the way a well-dressed man buys a good watch. Most of the ones that crossed the Atlantic came off surrendered officers in the last spring of the war, in towns that had already run up the white flags, and a pistol that size needed no crate and no explanation. It went into a shirt pocket or the toe of a boot, and for the overwhelming majority of the Americans who carried one home, that was the entire transaction. A German pistol, taken from a man who no longer needed it, with nothing written down anywhere to say so. An ordinary 38H today is worth a few $100s. In 2004, a 38H that had belonged to the Waffen SS General Sepp Dietrich sold at auction for $43,125. The same pistol in every measurable way except for the name attached to it and the paper that proved the name was true. The American who got a signature and a unit and a date onto a piece of paper multiplied what he was carrying by 100 times over. Most men did not bother. Number 8, the Radom Vis 35. Before 1939, Polish officers considered it the best service pistol fielded by any army in Europe, a 9mm design built at the state arsenal in the city of Radom. When Germany overran Poland that autumn, it seized the factory rather than close it, kept the tooling running, and renamed the gun the Pistol 35, stripping the Polish Eagle off the slide and issuing the pistols to Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, to police battalions, and to SS units occupying the country the gun had once been built to defend. Inside that factory, Polish workers falsified tolerances, smuggled parts out under their clothing, and passed complete pistols to the resistance under the eyes of the guards who were supposed to prevent exactly that. A vis that an American took off a German soldier in France or the Rhineland might have been built, in part, by a man actively trying to lose the war for the army he was arming. Nothing stamped on the pistol says so. Nothing in the paperwork could have. German-marked wartime examples sell today from around $1,000 to over $2,000, depending on which factory code and production grade the slide carries. The earliest guns, built before the occupation quality began to slip, bring the most. Number 7. The Browning High Power. It was John Browning's last design, finished after his death by Dieudonné Save at Fabrique Nationale in Herstal, Belgium. A 9mm pistol feeding from a 13-round magazine at a time when almost every other service pistol in the world, German included, held 8. When Germany overran Belgium in May of 1940, it inherited the factory along with the design and put the high power into its own service as the Pistol 640, made in occupied Belgium for the army that had conquered Belgium to carry. The magazine capacity is the whole reason an American wanted one badly enough to trade for it. A GY who came home with a captured high power was carrying more rounds in a single magazine than his own government-issue sidearm held loaded twice over, and men on patrol in the last year of the war traded hard. Cigarettes, whiskey, a week off guard duty, for the chance to own one. German occupation high powers, with clear Waffenamt proof marks, sell today for roughly $1,200 to $2,500, and the earliest guns, built with the original tangent rear sight and slotted grip before the occupation simplified the design, bring considerably more. Number 6. The Walther PPK. It was the shortened criminal model of 1931, the concealable version of the standard police pistol, and by the war years, it was carried by the Gestapo, by SS officers, by Luftwaffe pilots who wanted something smaller than a service pistol under a flight jacket, and by senior officials of the party itself. On the 30th of April, 1945, in a concrete bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, it was the pistol Adolf Hitler used on himself. One variant outranks every other trophy on this list for what it announced about its owner. The honor weapon of the political leaders was a presentation PPK issued to NSDAP officials, its grips cast in one piece from brown plastic, wrapped around the frame, an eagle and a wreath molded into both sides. A gun that identified its owner's politics before it ever left the holster, and one that some German officials threw into rivers in the last weeks of the war, rather than be found carrying. An ordinary Nazi-marked PPK today runs into the low thousands of dollars. A party leader, PPK, sold with its capture documents intact, brought $10,900 at auction. Number 5. The Mauser C96 broom handle. In production since 1896, it is the oldest famous automatic pistol in Europe. Its magazine mounted ahead of the trigger guard and its grip carved into the shape that gave it its name. It fought through the First World War, sold across the world to police forces, colonial administrations, and private buyers between the wars. And it was still turning up in German holsters in 1945. Sometimes carried by an officer whose father had carried the same model a generation earlier. It came, in its proper configuration, with a wooden shoulder stock that doubled as its holster, and that stock made the C96 the single most awkward object on this list to smuggle home. Most men left it behind and carried the pistol alone, wrapped in a shirt at the bottom of his barracks bag. The reunited pairs, pistol and its matching numbered stock together, are rare today for exactly that reason. A wartime-marked C96 today sells from around $1,500 to $4,000. An original stock and holster, correctly numbered to the pistol, can add $1,000 or more by itself. Number 4, the Mauser M712 Schnellfeuer. It was the selective fire version of the broom handle, built by Mauser from 1932. Capable of emptying a 20-round magazine in under 2 seconds on full automatic. Roughly 100,000 were made, most sold abroad before the war, but Nazi-accepted examples were issued to Waffen-SS units and to Luftwaffe air crews who wanted more than a single trigger pull could give them. This is the item where the danger changes shape. For everything else on this list, the risk was in Europe. The walk toward the pistol on the road, the booby-trapped mechanism, the fight to take it off a man who did not want to give it up. For the Schnellfeuer, the danger was still waiting at home. The National Firearms Act of 1934 had made an unregistered machine gun a federal felony inside the United States, and a capture certificate signed by a captain in a farmhouse in Bavaria meant nothing at all to the Treasury Department in Ohio. A GI who brought a Schnellfeuer back in his duffel bag had brought home a felony, and a great many of them knew it, and never told anyone what they owned. Some were surrendered during federal amnesty periods over the following decades. Some were buried. Some were cut into pieces in a garage and thrown out with the trash. The handful that were properly registered are today worth $20,000 and up. An unregistered one, wherever it is sitting right now, remains the same federal felony it was in 1945. Number 3, the Luger artillery model, The Langpistole 08 was built for artillery crews and stormtroops in the First World War. An 8-inch barrel, a rear sight graduated optimistically out to 800 meters, a detachable board stock that turned the pistol into a small carbine, and a 32-round drum magazine that made it look, to a soldier who had never seen one, like something out of the wrong century. It was already obsolete by the Second War, and that obsolescence is exactly why so many were still around in 1945, stored in depots, issued to second-line units when nothing else was left, or hanging on the wall of a German household as a father's souvenir of the war before this one. A good number of the artillery Lugers that Americans brought home were not taken in combat at all. They were found during house searches, off a wall, a family relic seized along with the house it hung in. A matching artillery Luger with its correct stock and holster rig sells today from around $4,000 to well over $8,000, and the drum magazines alone, separated from the pistols they were built for, bring hundreds of dollars on their own. Number 2, the Walther P38. Germany adopted it in 1938 to replace the Luger, a double-action 9mm pistol with a locked breech falling block action that was simpler and faster to manufacture, and by the surrender, Walther, Mauser, and Spreewerk had built more than 1,200,000 of them between them. The wartime production code stamped on the slide read like a countdown of the collapse. The earliest guns are finally finished and carry Walther's own name. The middle years carry a plain 3-letter factory code, and the last guns off the line are rough, gray, and stamped with a finish no better than a hardware store tool. The Mauser-built guns fitted with black plastic grips are the ones American collectors call Black Widows now, hunted specifically because they mark a factory and a moment, not because they functioned any differently than the rest. A standard wartime P38 today runs roughly $800 to $1,500. A matching numbers Black Widow averages closer to $3,800. And the same gun with non-matching parts falls back to around $1,900. The difference again being paper. Whether the numbers stamped on the frame, the slide, and the barrel still agree with each other after 80 years in parts bins and gunsmiths' trays. Number 1. The Luger P08. The toggle-action 9mm pistol had been standard issue since 1908. And stayed in production for the German military into 1942, and by any measure, it is the most recognizable handgun in the world. The single most requested war trophy of the entire European campaign. Men wrote home asking their families to expect one before they had fired a shot in anger. It was small enough to matter, and famous enough that everyone, on both sides, knew exactly what it was the moment it came out of a holster. It is also the pistol from the warning printed in February of 1945. German units left Lugers lying in obvious places, on a road, in a farmhouse, beside a body. With a small charge concealed inside the mechanism, powerful enough to injure a man severely, set to detonate the moment he pressed the trigger. The intelligence bulletin never explained why the Luger was the pistol they chose to rig, rather than any other in the German inventory. The reason is simple enough to state without drama. The Germans had watched American soldiers for 5 years. They knew, better than the Americans knew it about themselves, exactly which pistol on a battlefield an American would walk toward and pick up. An ordinary wartime P08 brings around $1,800 now. A Mauser BIF-coated 1942 gun anywhere from $1,000 to over $2,000, and a matching numbers Black Widow variant closer to $3,800. The ones that come with capture papers naming the American who took it and the date he took it are worth more again, because the paper is the only part of the gun that ever says what it actually cost him. Hundreds of thousands of these pistols are still sitting in American houses right now, in nightstands, in gun safes, in shoeboxes pushed to the back of closets that have not been opened in years. The great majority of them have no paper at all. not because nothing happened, but because the man who carried it home decided, at some point on the voyage back or in the years after, that explaining where he had gotten it was harder than never mentioning it again. The men who did file capture papers are the reason any of this can be known with certainty. A slip of paper carrying a unit, a date, and a captain's signature turns an anonymous German pistol into the record of one specific afternoon in one specific European town, the only difference in most cases between a gun and a fact. Somewhere in an American house this year, a table will be cleared for an estate sale, and a Luger will be set down on it in the ordinary daylight of a kitchen, next to the flatware and the folded linens. 80 years have passed since it last fired anything but a proof round, and the toggle still racks smoothly, the way German machining built before 1942 was made to still do. The family standing around the table will not know whether the man who carried it took it off a dead officer outside a farmhouse, bought it from a buddy for 2 cartons of cigarettes, or picked it up off a road in the Ardennes he had been warned about twice, in writing, before he ever reached for it. The pistol does not say, it never did. It only still works.